Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be having a look at an interview which was posted recently on Key.Aero, which is an aviation enthusiasts website. Basically, it is by the team at Key Publishing, and it seems like it's a general PR interview when it comes to War Thunder, trying to get people to know the game and get into it. And a lot of the questions and answers are actually very similar to what we've seen before, basically talking about Gaijin themselves, how they started with War Thunder, how they revolutionized not just the simulator market, but also the free-to-play market when it comes to the game. But also at the same time, they do have some questions and answers in here which I think are pretty interesting to go through. One of them actually mentions the fact that 4th generation jets are going to be here, which is pretty cool. And also a few other ones when it comes to the general way that vehicles are implemented in the game and how they get a bunch of different assets and how they all bring it together. And I think generally that should be something which should be looked at, because it's not something that's always brought up. So understand, I'm not going to go through every question. I will show the vast majority of them on the screen in this first little bit, just to kind of show you some of the answers, but understand a lot of it we've been through before, and I don't really want to go again because it's a lot of the backstory of War Thunder itself. I'll also leave little chapters in the description so you can click to the different questions that I'll cover. I'll give my thoughts on them and all of that good stuff. So anyway, let's get started. So the first question I want to have a look at actually pertains to the amount of work and effort that goes into making even just a specific jet when it comes to War Thunder. Now understand, because this is posted on an aviation website, pretty much all the questions are aiming towards aviation and not just ground stuff. So the question is, in terms of the individual aircraft, can you describe the work involved in producing both the internal and external graphics? And the answer was, initially, we make lists of aircraft and their specific modifications and decide when they should appear in the game. After that, the information collection period begins. Our historical consultants collect all available information that may be required to recreate a visual model of an aircraft, its flight characteristics, systems, and weapons. This period can take several weeks, and the result is a huge document thoroughly describing a real aircraft, as well as a set of visual references such as photos, diagrams, drawings, and technical documentation like monographs and manuals. After that, we proceed to create two parts of the aircraft, which are an exterior model and a cockpit model. Usually this is done by two different teams of modelers whose work is supervised by our technical artists, who constantly analyze the stages of work and leave comments on errors that need to be corrected. The exterior model and the cockpits take an average of 2 to 4 months of work, showing how much effort goes in. So let's talk about the general time period that these things can happen with, and why the idea that Gaijin just plans like 2 or 3 months ahead of time is obviously a bit bogus. So even if we look at the most, I suppose, bad representation of this, it takes several weeks to bring together all the information on a vehicle. Let's say that's 3 to 4 weeks or a month, and then to model the thing, it takes at least 2 to 4 months. So before even deciding on what vehicles to add in, which will probably take, probably a few weeks or so, especially planning out when they come into the game, you already have at least 3 to 7 months of work ahead of you, showing how far they actually plan in the future just for one specific aircraft. It's been talked about a lot, and even in interviews talked about by Gaijin employees, the idea that they have plans way into the future. And any decent business does. They have 3-year plans, they have 5-year plans, even sometimes 10-year, 15-year plans, depending on how far they want to go. And as you go further into the future, when it comes to your plans, they get a little bit more scraggly, because you never know what's going to happen. But in terms of just one specific aircraft being added, there is at least 4 to 5 to 6 months of work to get it into the game and in a flight-worthy setup. This is just the model, by the way. This doesn't include the flight model. This doesn't include anything like that. This is just the bare bones base physical model that you specifically see. And as it says here, the fact is you have two different teams of modelers working on the exterior one and also the cockpit model, showing that they work in tandem, and this leads to something which Gaijin have actually said before, where it actually takes about the same amount of time to produce a cockpit as it does a full plane itself. I'm guessing this is what they're referring to, where they work, you know, in tandem with each other. It just shows how much effort just goes into a single vehicle. And think about the fact that War Thunder has 20, 30, 40, 50 vehicles that get added at a time, and this just gives you a kind of look into the scope of this game and how insane it is compared to all of its other competitors. You know, the only one which gets close, I suppose, is World of Tanks when it comes to its ground vehicles, but if you compare it to something like DCS or IL-2, the actual production of War Thunder, obviously the models themselves may be individually not as perfect when it comes to the DCS stuff, because, you know, the whole clickable cockpits and functionality, but the overall just amount is insane, and the quality of that also is insane and has to be lauded. And that is all front money, if that makes sense. All of this work for 6 months is done before even any money can be made on this product itself. And we're not even talking about 6 months, it's probably even longer than that in some cases. And they may even decide that a vehicle they've created is not ready to be able to be released for a few years. So the amount of money that is pumped into these things is insane when you think about it, and makes you realize why there is people who haven't been able to replicate the success that War Thunder has. Obviously there's other reasons as well, like the revolution or the evolution that they were able to create with the mouse aiming mechanics for War Thunder, but there's stuff like this as well which is just astronomical when you think about it. The next question that I'm going to cover actually looks at the other side of the implementation of a vehicle. So you have the physical model, and then you also have the flight model. And the question is, or the statement is, similarly, please explain the work involved in producing the flight models for the individual aircraft and how you would describe the level of fidelity. And Gaijin says, at first, we collect all the available technical documentation for the aircraft, from flying instructions to repair manuals. Later, we collect various reports on the field tests. Based on the information we get, the basic flight characteristics of the aircraft are formed, so speed, climb rate, roll rate, stall speed on a clean wing, and with flaps. At the next step, we look at wind tunnel airflow results. Ideally, we use not only the drag polars of the whole aircraft, but also of its individual parts, including wings, empennage, and fuselage. Unfortunately, sometimes it's impossible to get such polars. In the case, we use the well-known polars of the shapes that are used on the aircraft. For example, when we know that the aircraft uses the NACA 230 airfoil shape, we can use graphs for it. Fortunately, there are many of them. When all the basic flight characteristics of an aircraft or a helicopter are in place, we proceed to fine-tune the behavior of the aircraft in various flight modes, such as low speeds, high speeds, behavior in maneuvers, to match the information on the real model we have. With this approach, it is possible to create a flight model with very good accuracy. And I would say so. The accuracy of most flight models in War Thunder is pretty decent. It's a lot better than it used to be. I remember when War Thunder first started, and when we had historical battles and simulator battles, and there were definitely some aircraft with what we'll class as funky FMs. There was also some which shared FMs, and you sometimes see that even nowadays when it comes to the dev server. where sometimes an aircraft will not have its full FM modeled at the time of the dev server, and it will actually use a different one while it is being fine-tuned. So it shows you all of this work, which also goes into the other side of things. So this is another set of people who are fine-tuning this stuff and making sure that the vehicle itself is ready to go before it is ready for the game. So in order for all of this stuff to happen, you need the physical model done first. So once again, we're building off that like 4 to 6 to 8 month period, and we're adding even more months to it. So even just one singular plane, this could easily be a year's worth of work. It could even be more than a year's worth of work, depending on how technical it is, depending on how much work gets involved in it. And just remember, that's just one plane. Normally you get 20 or 30 a patch, plus event vehicles, plus battle pass vehicles, plus everything else. It is absolutely insane when you think about it, and it's something that I will constantly bring up when it comes to War Thunder. They've been ramping up production consistently when it comes to the game for many years now, and it frightens me to think what may come next, because after last year I thought there was no way they could increase production once again, but it looks like they are, and they're just going to keep pounding on, and they're going to keep doing crazy stuff, which is awesome, but at the same time is a little bit worrying, because it means that the other side of things, which is not just the production of the vehicles, but the balance of the game, that is where we seem to have more of the problems when it comes to War Thunder. And of course, the major thing that everybody is looking forward to is, of course, the last question in the article. And it is, can you tell us about any future plans and developments you have for War Thunder? And the answer is, we usually release 5 major updates per year. Each of them brings dozens of new war machines, some maps, visual and gameplay improvements. We do not disclose the content plan beforehand so as to not spoil any surprises, but we can reveal to you that 4th generation fighter jets are coming to War Thunder in 2022. So there you have it. They will be here at some point. My guess would be the September update. I'll be very surprised if it's the first update, because obviously that's going to be Israeli ground. They've also talked about the idea of a Finland subtectory for Sweden. Hopefully we get another Q&A soon as well, which we can go through and work out the little hints and stuff that people they can give us. But yeah, there is your confirmation that 4th generation fighters are on their way. Now, the thing is, using the idea of generations is really annoying, and I'll tell you exactly why. Different people, or different authors, or different nations use the generations of aircraft differently. Here's a table to show you what I mean. So for some, such as Hallion, they say that the 4th generation of fighters is a supersonic limited purpose Mach 2 air-to-air missile only. So F-104s, MiG-21s, Mirage 3, Shenyang J-8. Well, we've already got them, so it can't be that, apart from the J-8, of course. But then you have you have 3 of them, Aerospace Web, Air Force Magazine, and Air Power Development Center. They all put Generation 4 at supersonic multi-role, high efficiency, high maneuverability, which would be the F-14, F-15, F-16, MiG-29, Mirage 2000, so vehicles like that. Now, I think that is probably what they're discussing. And then, of course, the PLA actually puts the Generation 4 at today, so literally F-22, F-35, J-20, Su-57. So they are, way behind the thing when it comes to this stuff. So it really depends on who you decide when it comes to this stuff, who is correct on this front. But my guess is it's going to be that 74 period to 1990, it's probably going to be an F-14, or it's going to be a prototype F-16, or it's going to be the Mirage 2000. If I was going to hazard a guess, my guess would actually be the Mirage 2000. The reason for this is because France desperately needs some kind of aircraft. They've obviously added a few to them, but none of them are up to the level of what we have at the current high tier. And Gaijin also have a good knack of doing something where they add a very, very good vehicle to one nation, which is a minor nation, and then follow it up with the major nations getting a ton of stuff. So we saw this with the Viggen, where they added the Viggen to the Swedish, everybody flocked to it, and then of course the MiG-23 MLD came out for the Soviets, and also the Americans got a few fancy toys as well. So for me, my guess would be Mirage 2000, and then we'll get stuff like the F-14. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something like a sponsorship deal with the movie, good old Top Gun 2. We've talked about it before and the idea of it, and it isn't that far-fetched, especially since it's been postponed many times. The problem with doing something like that, though, is of course it may get postponed again. The funny thing is, though, if you want to be critical about it, and if you want to use period of time, one of the more interesting things is we technically already have a Generation 4 vehicle in the game, if you want to use time period, and that is the J7E. The J7E is a 1990s Chinese vehicle going into the early 2000s when it comes to its production. So depending on who you believe, it's actually a Generation 4 or 5 aircraft, if you want to use the time periods idea. So yeah, it shows that functionality is definitely something that is worth looking at. But we are coming to the end of the supersonic Mach 2 air-to-air missile-only area, and we will be pushing on to the next areas after the F-4, the MiG-23, and of course the F-1. We may even get the Tornado. I think that would also be something that you could see from the Italian point of view and also other countries. So there is definitely a ton of development coming. At this point, when it comes to aviation and ground, aviation is already outspeeding ground when it comes to BR, so when it comes to technology, it's going to increase even further. It's going to be wonderful to see what comes in War Thunder this year. After knowing some stuff that's coming, and after seeing some things, and also guessing a few things, it's going to be a good year, and it's going to be fun to cover it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.